Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Martin. I'm a member at Sidebar. For everyone who's joined us, I encourage you to get on camera, be present, be engaged, and get some personal time with Ruchi to ask some of your hot questions. And then, Ruchi, do you want to go ahead and get started? Are we ready?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be very happy to. Glad to be here, everyone. Maybe let me just introduce myself first and
Actually,
then,
do you
oh,
mind if I introduce Sidebar and then I'll introduce you?
sounds great,
Absolutely.
Kim.
Forgive me, I should have been clearer. So that was on me. So, again, everybody, my name is Kim Martin. I am a proud member of Sidebar, which is an organization where we are a referral and invitation led leadership group. We're founded on the principles of generosity, trust, growth, and we are on a mission to help unleash the potential of everyone within our network and within our ecosystems. So personally, I've been a member of Sidebar now for about 12 plus months. And I will say that the biggest value to me has been the relationships that I have established and I've been nurturing and developing the whole time. The relationships are built on me, who I am, the value I bring as a human, the industry expertise that I bring, regardless of the role that I have, the company that I'm working for, or just the title that I hold. So I would just say that the biggest, most meaningful piece of change that's happened for me within Sidebar is the peers that I have relationships well with now. There's no political issues. I know that they're working on my best interest when they give me advice. The mentorships and the mentees that I've met, I know that these are genuine relationships that I will have years from now, and they're just not establishing a relationship with me just simply because of what I could do for them. So I encourage you to think, if you're missing that type of professional connection, I encourage you to think about Sidebar. Feel free to reach out to me, give me a call, or reach out to any of us within Sidebar if you know a member. It's my pleasure to introduce Ruchi. Ruchi is a speaker here today. She's going to talk to us about AEO. She spent over 20 years in marketing within very well-known financial service and payment firms, PayPal, JP Morgan, GE, and the World Bank. Most recently, and most importantly, she flipped her role to the other side of being a financial service provider and went into e-commerce. She was the head of client marketing for WooCommerce, which enabled her to see multiple sides of the ecosystem. She's also now founded Kashi AI, which is a Google Analytics for LLM traffic firm. The traffic that never lands in your website but shapes every customer decision in LLMs like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and all the other ones that we're talking about. So she is definitely seeing what's coming in when it comes to marketing. Ruchi, if you want to add on anything that I haven't, please let us know more about you.
Thank you, Kim. I'm really, really happy to be here. It takes effort to commit 1 hour to a session. So let me share with you what my goals are. There are two. One is that by the end of the hour, hopefully you have three things that you can do to make sure your website is actually teaching LLMs about your business and your category. I'll talk about why that's important, how that can help you. My second goal is to make sure this time is worth your while. So we are a small group. Use the chat, um, raise your hand, and I'm here to help. That's my calling for doing Kachi.ai anyway. And I have my LinkedIn QR code. Reach out to me if you think of a question that I can help with. I'll be very happy to. So, with that, maybe we should spend some time on what changed in the world just to align our brain before we get into what we can do about it. My first job was at the World Bank. I was helping them manage a portion of their website. And it was important because before anybody could get to speak to a human, they used that website to learn about the business. And what I'm told as an intern is like, well, really optimize for two audiences, Google search and humans. As I thought about that, what it meant was when people searched for things related to what we did, we must appear, we should rank high. So keywords and rankings mattered. Traffic, driving traffic to the website really mattered. And when the humans were on the site, we made sure that the websites were beautiful. They were visually pleasing, informative, And there were many calls to actions everywhere. So we can then drive conversion, whether it's a subscription, a purchase, or book a demo, whatever that conversion is, that it was present at the right moments. There were many frequently asked questions, but they were all very tactical. You were already there on the website. So, how can you open an account? How can you return your purchase? How long does the shipping take? There were really not many questions around what the business did and why. So, when LLMs changed this entire behavior for all of us very rapidly, there was a gap. There was a gap in what the websites were meant to do, which was to receive keyword traffic. Suddenly now it had to speak up on behalf of the business. And not just for Google, there were many more players in the market. ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini belongs to Google, but still a different player. So what that meant, um, number one change was, this is as of August 2025 from McKinsey. I'm sure the numbers are more aggressive now, but majority of the audience now start their journey not with Google, with LLMs. So you may have seen it on LinkedIn. Is AI search just a replacement of traditional search? The big call out is no, it's not, because what we do with LLMs is different than what we did with Google search. For example, we feel very comfortable asking questions. We are very comfortable relying on the answers that LLMs provide, versus with Google, we were just looking at a keyword search. So there are incremental use cases around research, evaluation, decision making that LLMs are opening up for a business and for us. So what? So what? Google took so much pride in kicking us out of the experience, versus LLMs always want us to be there, right? The last question or prompt is always like, what more can I do for you? So, of course, the immediate impact is traffic. And then if traffic is just a leading indicator, why does it matter? Well, we use that traffic to put these calls to action that I talked about. You lost that opportunity to talk to the customer. And so revenue for most of the businesses are also being impacted. Depending on the type of business you do, the impact is lower or higher. But traffic is no longer the way I was asked to measure and report when I was leading marketing for many big companies. Long-term impact is more concerning, which is on brand. What I mean by that is, for many of our conversations with LLMs, the ask is to get to a recommendation, not necessarily a website. So, for example, if I'm asking to buy a shoe, I'm describing my use case and I want a few recommendations. I don't want a website of Nike or on cloud or whatever other provider is. So, what do you do in that situation when, again, you are not really getting the customers to your website to tell your story, like why your brand matters? So that's the reason it is very, very important as a business to understand what LLMs do, why, how that's changing customer behavior, and stay ahead of that journey to protect your brand, to protect the traffic that actually converts. So to do that, first, let's learn a little bit about LLMs. So in 2025, these are the sources that were predominantly used by LLMs to enrich their data set. Reddit, Wikipedia, YouTube, Google, Yelp, and so on and so forth. Depending on the LLM, of course, the sources were slightly different. For example, Gemini would rely more on YouTube because that's kind of a sister property. Now, what's very interesting is that this is going to stay. This is going to stay because LLMs have to come up with an objective view on the content that they are learning. But how does your website feature into that? And why do I even care about the website at this point? Because there are many who don't. They say, well, website is dead. I don't think that website is dead. But I'll tell you many businesses what they do today and why. And that will prove the point why we really need to focus on the website. So many businesses respond to AEO, AI search, GEO, whatever you call it, in the following way. They use a tool. There are so many tools. Even if you're using an SEO provider, you're using a website hosting platform, they might be offering this for you for free. For free. So before you buy, ask me, and then I'll tell you where you can find it for free. But what they do is they will come to you and say, hey, let's come up with questions related to your brand. So I have this Bluetooth speaker JBL next to me. If I'm at JBL, then they will say, what is JBL? How it's different from XYZ? You can come up with hundreds of questions. Then they run this question bank on different LLMs like Claude, ChatGPT, and they tell you of the questions that matter to your business. What's your visibility? How many times you showed up? 100 times, 60%, 50%. And when you showed up, what was the sentiment? Positive, negative, or neutral? And what was your share of voice vis-a-vis your competitors? With that, you will get a few recommendations to improve these metrics: visibility, sentiment, and share of voice. The cost differs depending on the volume of questions, the LLMs you want to cover, and the frequency of the run. Now, there is a goodness to it, like it directionally tells you what LLM answers say about you, which kind of caters to our human need to know what people say. But there are some severe limitations that you need to keep in mind when you use this approach. One, LLMs are non-deterministic. So every time you ask a question to LLM, like all of us asking the same question, will get a slightly different result. It is not a question mechanism, it's a conversation. So LLMs build on the questions that you ask. These are not disjointed questions. LLMs remember and they're sensitive to prompts. So it's very likely that what you see in the report, it's not the reality of your customer truly asking that question. For me, as a marketer, the most important gap is, so what? I improved my visibility, sentiment, and share of voice. How does that ultimately translate to my revenue? That's what I care about. I care about creating awareness, driving customers, and then customers who actually convert. So there is that the metrics are disjointed for me. You can use a few free tools to run this experiment for your brand after the call, whenever you have time, and it will be a very interesting experiment. So, for example, HubSpot has a free AEO grader. Href is offering a free AEO grader. You can put your website URL in it and see what the results say. I guarantee you, although I don't know where you work, that the results are going to be dramatically different. And now, as a business, if you're just using one of the tools, that creates a little bit of a risk because you don't want to make decisions based on one view that may not be accurately represented. The other approach that I see many marketers do, and I've spoken to about 200 of them in 1 year, is they focus on properties that are not their website. So they talk about how to do more with the community or sponsored PR or reviews. And although this language sounds aggressive, as if they are kind of doing gray hat methods, you can somewhat strike a balance. But ultimately, these are all off-domain properties, whereas on-domain property, which is your primary asset, your website, is ignored in this equation. And that's where I have a problem, because I know that the websites were never built so far to cater to LLMs. But what if they were? What if the LLMs truly learned about you from you? Before we got into how to fix that, there is a quick exercise that we're going to do. There are actually two. And it's not really a data exercise. It's something with our psychology, like how we treat LLMs differently for our brand versus other brands. So maybe we can use the React feature here. If some of you feel comfortable, maybe raise your hand if you have searched your brand or your product in ChatGPT or Claude or on any other LLM. I'm not going to make you speak, so you can feel free to raise your hand.
It's okay. I will encourage those that want to talk as well. It's okay. We love to talk and engage. So if anyone
Okay.
does have a response in chat, Tiffany has a response, and there's no criticism or judgment. If you want, Tiffany, could you embellish a little bit more on perhaps why you haven't yet?
Yeah. And that's completely okay if you haven't. Yeah. But maybe do it so you know what it feels like, right? And Chris, you have done it for one client. Now, let me tell you what happens when at least the marketers that I've spoken to, when they search for their brand or product on LLMs, they are relatively okay with the answer. Usually, LLMs give you a good enough answer about your brand or your product. Of course, if you're creating a new category, you're about to launch a new product, then the knowledge about things that are not so pervasive is less so in LLMs. So those answers are relatively weak. Nobody feels amazing about that product. So, for example, Kim used an LLM maybe to learn about Kachi when she introduced myself. And I was like, Google Analytics for LLMs, the traffic that never lands on your site. It's right, it's correct. But that's not what I want to say about my brand. I want to say about my brand is that LLMs are going to learn something about you from somewhere, make sure it's your website. So that's the gap. That's the gap. Now, the funny thing is that in exercise two, this is where maybe some of you have already used an LLM to get to a recommendation or learn about a brand, plan a vacation, think about a hotel, plan it. I don't know, like my older one is ready to apply to colleges. So we are doing college research, and I somehow lean in on the recommendation that Claude provides to me about what colleges might be worth shortlisting for my son. And I somehow trust that recommendation, although I know the limitations that LLMs have when they talk about my brand, because it's so much work otherwise, right? There was a time when we kind of checked the sources to make sure there is not much hallucinations, but now we have somewhat accepted the hallucination. So how we accept the answer about other brands versus how we are critical about the answers on our brand is a very, very important behavior change that we need to keep in mind, because your prospects, your customers are also trusting the answers about you in LLMs. Yes, Kumar, go ahead.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So what I did was I used to be head of marketing for at Fortinet, right? As one of the
Mhm.
cybersecurity companies. So I asked a question, ChatGPT, what do you think about Fortinet SASE? SASE is the product they're pushing big time, right? So
Mm.
it's getting information from multiple sources. It's getting information from Gartner, it's getting information from Reddit, and it's also getting information from the website. Because what I've seen before is it gives more weight to those from responses of from forums like Reddit. And
Yep,
then again, this is a technology product. It also gets input from or extracts information from Gartner and other sources,
true, true,
right?
Kumar.
Multiple sources.
That's a great observation. The fact is that LLMs may continue doing that because LLMs have to make sure that they work on accuracy to be better than the other LLM in the market. I'll give you an example. Just a week ago, Google had to pay fines, hefty fines in Germany because they were accused of misrepresentation in Google AI overviews or Google AI answers that you see. And the court in Germany said that that content is yours, you authored it. Now it's an AI algorithm, but LLMs have to start taking responsibility. So to get to accuracy, they need that diverse data set. But Kumar, the point is that today the website doesn't quite make it easy for LLMs to get those trust signals from their website. And it's because we never had to. It's not a criticism, it's an opportunity. For example, we didn't really have to highlight beyond the badges that we put about G2 and Gartner leader and whatnot on our website. They were just beautiful images without any kind of tags that will tell LLMs that, hey, we have these awards and accreditations and reviews. Because again, we didn't have to, but that's an opportunity. So say if we were to work together for Fortinet and you were to search for the same question, say 6 months out, for example, you may see other sources showing up too, but most likely you will see your website playing a more dominant role. And it's just because we're going to fix those gaps for the website. And I'm going to talk about those levers here too. So of course, you can also do some of those things DIY. There is no rocket science here. It's honestly a lot of hard work. So I'm going to share what we do.
But if I'm searching, then it's self-promotion, right? If I'm enhancing my website with the intent of messaging and communication, it's more like self-promotion. What I've seen is the LLMs look for multiple sources. Again, that's one of the reasons they go for Reddit, right? What do they say? What do the forums say, right? I don't know what the weighting is. I'm sure that has more weight than my website, personal website. Am I saying that right?
It depends on the business and the question. It's true, though, that for some of the questions, Reddit or Wikipedia or G2 or Gartner may have a higher weightage than the website. But once you have a baseline of how your website is feeding LLMs, then you can always improve that baseline. That's the use case we are making. So for example, today there might be 100% of use cases on LLMs. The way your website is structured today, maybe you're showing up for 60 to 70% of them. The goal is that can you get to 75%, 80%, 85%? And the reason why that makes sense is you can't seed Reddit communities. They will kick you out. But website is your primary owned asset where you can talk about your brand. Now, if you start using that for promotional language, which LLMs can't substantiate, it is going to do more harm than good. But most of us really want to just tell our story. There is a reason why we exist. There is a reason why we exist in a crowded market. There is the reason why we want to connect with our customers. And I'll give you an example. When I was at PayPal, I was in the brand team when we spun off from eBay. And at that time, we were relaunching an $8 billion brand on NASDAQ. And we worked so hard to come up with our brand architecture. We wanted to be known as new money. There were proof points on why we should be new money. We were ubiquitous, we were digital. We worked very, very hard. And then we did Super Bowl campaigns and digital activation. But 90% of maybe what we worked stayed in the conference room because really search was not smart enough to understand and convey that to our customers. So it was not promotional. It was the brand that we wanted to be known for. And now it's an opportunity for the websites to tell that story. You can always abuse that power, right? But here it's not about abusing the power. It's really about how you can make it easy for LLMs to access you, understand you, and then influence in a healthy manner and play the long game. It is not running a campaign where by tomorrow, suddenly your LLM visibility through website like skyrockets. And Kumar, we can come back to that once I kind of share what my approach is, because I would love to know whether it helps you in the business that you're a part of.
Sure, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So with that, and then this is very timely, what we were talking about. If about, say, just 10% of what LLMs say about you doesn't come from your website, it poses some threats. You can't control the narrative. It carries reputation debt. And that's a big one for many of my clients, right? If they are changing strategies, they are, say, going into the agentic world, or they are expanding into new geos, that story is not told yet. And the website has to be the starting point. So how do you do that? So if there is one thing that I want you to get out of this session and remember it, is this slide, which is access, comprehension, and influence. That's the formula we're going to follow on our website to make sure LLMs can access our content LLMs can fully comprehend our content that already exists. And then we realize what are the incremental use cases from LLMs, and we talk about that on our website. All things being equal, if you were to do this, then it is very likely that you will show up in more LLM answers because you're giving material that LLMs can actually use to understand you and represent you. So I'll talk about each of them and exactly what I mean. First is access, and there is a lot on this slide. Bear with me, I'll walk you through the details. 1 in 5 customers that we worked so far had LLMs blocked from their website. 1 in 5. 1 in 5. Not entirely, maybe, but some parts of the website. Also, enterprise accounts. And I'll tell you why. We are still in the early stages of emerging from malicious bot world to good bots world. So, and people change. So there might be some security rules that are set up for your business that have not been revisited. I'm a marketer and I never cared about this page called robots.txt because I cared about authoring new content. I cared about launching new campaigns. So now we again have to understand that LLMs are machines and make it very easy for them to get to us. So there are 3 checks you can do manually, or you can get a platform like Kachi that can do this for you at scale in a repeated way, but at least do 3 checks manually, which is first check your robots.txt page. So how do you get to that page? It's publicly available for any business. So you'll see the snapshot of my page. So kachi.ai/robots.txt. If you are at NVIDIA, nvidia.com/robots.txt. When you open it up, it will hopefully have some language. If it doesn't have any language, then it should have some language. So this is essentially a directive that you can give to LLMs to say, hey, LLMs, you are welcome to my site. You're allowed here, you're disallowed here. Here is my sitemap. So kind of giving them an orientation. What my robots.txt says, which works for small businesses because I'm still starting out, which is, hey, user agents, which are LLMs, all of you are allowed across my website because I want to be discovered. You're just disallowed from my pages, which are not going to help with that discovery, which is privacy and terms and cookie policy accessibility. As you become more mature or you are with a more mature business, there are maybe more disallowed rules. So for example, similar pages, you don't want LLMs to go to the same page or same kind of page twice. So you can block some of those pages. Logged in instances, that's a big one. So my product is not on my website, it's a separate platform. So in that case, I don't have to worry about LLMs trying to get into my product. So if you have a logged in version on your website where somebody can log in, of course, you don't want LLMs to get there. It's really serving the marketing discovery use cases. So maybe those are blocked. You can ask an LLM to help you with a robots.txt. You can reach out to me too. I'll be very happy to help. This is a marketing directive. What trumps this is the second check. So if your security team has put something in place to say, hey, these bots are not allowed or no bots are allowed, right? Then no matter what you say in robots.txt, that's not going to be quite honored. There are some LLMs that kind of disregard the robots.txt rules, but the security rule they have to honor because that is something kind of like, I wouldn't say hard-coded, but more like stronger. So talk to your security or your website team and see what rule exists. Now, if you're a small business and you don't have this team, then your website hosting platform, check with them what their policy is, especially if you're on a more affordable website hosting platform, because the volume of LLM traffic on a website is so large that there is cost to store and make that data available to you. And also there are some hosting platforms that have a philosophical argument around should LLMs consume your content and kill internet tomorrow. Whatever that reason might be, if your job and you're writing content to be discovered, you want to be in power to decide who can and cannot access you. So again, check your robots.txt, talk to your website or security team, and look at what your website hosting platform policy says. When these rules are in place, there is something called server logs, which is your entry point to the website, which will essentially tell you what LLMs are accessing your website content versus not. That is a very healthy check. But if you check these three, most likely your traffic is cleared and LLMs are welcome on your site. Without this, no matter what else you do, not going to quite matter because you're just not allowing LLMs to get to you. Second is comprehension, which is how well LLMs understand your content today. The content that's already on your website, you put effort in putting it there. There is a reason why that exists. You just have to make sure that you're writing in a way that LLMs can actually understand it. In our platform, we do over 10 checks. But if I have to prioritize, these are the few I would, and I'll talk about what they are. One is Core Web Vitals. Your Google Search Console should show you those Core Web Vitals. What they are is how long does it take for your page to load, how responsive it is, does it time out? And they look at those metrics for your desktop and mobile both. And both are equally important, again, depending on the size of the business, your audience, where you operate. Decide what Core Web Vitals you want to check, but make sure your page health is robust. Then what we have done for decades for technical SEO, make sure that you prioritize that if you haven't. So make sure you have good schema markup and metadata, because that really, really helps LLMs understand what this page is about and what you are saying and what you want to convey. Third is freshness. LLMs do look for recent and relevant information. And that's one of the reasons that sometimes they don't choose website over other sources that just by nature, like Reddit, right? It's going to keep content fresh. There are active groups and chats. So take this time to make sure that you keep your information fresh. And I know it's one more task, not quite glamorous. But again, if LLMs are truly going to rely on content to understand you, of course, it's our job to also feed LLMs the information that we want them to know. And the last is content originality and depth. It makes it very easy with AI to create content. I'm sure most of you have read about studies around the quality of 100% AI generated content. It's pretty weak. Don't do that. You can use AI to accelerate the final content creation, but the idea, the data, that originality has to come from you. There has to be a message that you want to give, and that has to be your experience, your brain, your data, your customer story. LLMs are smart enough to know it's recycled otherwise, so there is really no value from an LLM perspective. There might be other reasons why you use AI generated content. So again, take your pages. If you're doing this manually, it requires effort. So maybe take your top 5 pages by traffic and start with that. And again, look at Core Web Vitals. You can do that through Google Search Console. There are also free services that can assess the URLs, like once you put them. Look for schema markup and metadata. Again, there are many free tools that can do that. Freshness, you can check when you last touched that page, if that page is important to you. And of course, whenever you author new content or when you're revisiting that content, make sure you have something helpful to talk about through that page. Last but not the least is influence. And this is very, very interesting because this is where your creative as a leader will shine. And this is where you can really make a difference using your website to teach LLMs about you. So now if you were to pause and think about what your customers might be using LLMs for, as far as your brand and products are concerned, you will come across many use cases. So for example, this is one of the most common ones. They want to know like why or when should I buy, why now, and why you? Why you? There are so many options. And they feel safe to talk about those use cases with LLMs. And it's not me saying that. There are research studies that talk about how LLMs have become our thought companion. So in that case, do you have content that can answer these questions on your website? Beyond transactional FAQs, do you have this content? And that is just one of the use cases. You know your business way better than I do, of course. So in that case, you can really think about what might be these other questions that you can understand and then answer. So again, feed LLMs what you think customers might ask about you. One tactic that works very well for mainly B2B companies that are sales-led with sales-led motion is use your sales calls to understand what questions people ask all the time. You can also, if you're a B2C, you can rely on your team to kind of just brainstorm what are the questions that we see, or maybe you have user research around that. So you're not coming up with a hypothesis. But to be honest with you, given most of the websites where they are, trust your intuition and start with that. Creating content takes time, it takes effort. So start with the most obvious use cases. There are a few things I want to point out here which are so interesting to me. One is that if LLMs are really used for research, evaluation, and decision making, I would always start from bottoms up, start from decision making use cases, then evaluation, then research, and I'll tell you why. When LLMs give a recommendation, that's where your brand is mentioned. When people are researching and they are not ready to go to a brand, it doesn't matter how well you feed that answer through your website. There is really no goodness comes out of it for your brand. The NPS of the LLM definitely goes up, and thanks to you all, but you don't really see that traffic and conversion. So with my enterprise clients, we do focus on research. If you're creating an entirely new category that people just don't know about, yes, focus on research questions. But otherwise, start from decision-making use cases. When somebody's just asking an LLM that these are the options I have, what should I do? Then go to the evaluation and then go up. The other useful technique that I have, there are so many, I feel like maybe there is one more I can share. Yeah, I mean, this is a technique that you may have known already, but going back to frequently asked question, maybe expand those questions to just answer a little bit about why do you exist. So it's really why now, why you, but spell it out as more like an FAQs on your website, and that can also help. When you do that, going back to what Kumar was saying, make sure that your answers are substantiated. So if you're running a restaurant, don't say we are the best in this area. What proof do you have to substantiate that? So be authentic with your story, and that can truly help you.
Ruchi, this makes me think, at least on the B2B side, where I have a lot of experience for myself. So this is the lens that I'm speaking from.
Mm-hmm.
It really does boil down to more and more value proposition and the identity and knowing as an organization or as an enterprise, the value that's being provided and desired by the client and how they see the ROI on the services and products that are being used. Being very clear on that in specificity and also in situational context, because I find more and more that generalities and the value proposition of we save you time, we make it fast, we make it easy, we make it simple, that language is no longer working when it comes to these LLMs, AEOs, GEOs, whatever you want to call them. I find, like you said, contextual depth, specifically specificity, clarity around more contextualization of situations, the ROIs, and creating this journey of what the outcome, aka what the transformation was, aka what's the value that's being provided, and then talking about how that value is being provided as a differentiator of the service provider is becoming way more important. And personally, I love that because that was always something that I was focused on for years. So I feel like I'm having one of those moments where I'm like, aha, I was right. Not trying to be righteous, but I love that it's becoming that where language and the specificity of value and differentiation and nuance is becoming way more important. And that helps to differentiate between signal and noise.
So true. So true. Ultimately, humans, right? When we came to the website, we understood with a little context what the message was. Our brain works that way. But LLMs are again machines, right? They are going to be more objective. They're going to be more detailed. They can process a lot more information. So just understanding that, accepting that can change and refine our approach. Oh, there is Brendan. Hi, Brendan. We work together at WooCommerce. Good to see you. And thank you for your questions. I'm going to come to your questions about the budget. That's honestly one of the most frequently asked questions to me when I start working with a business on how do you optimize for SEO and AEO, and how do you also proportionate the budget across the two? And for early stages, when do you start thinking about AEO? I'm going to come back to that in about 5 minutes. So just to recap again, the takeaway from here is that your website can step up for LLMs. It can play that role. To do that, the formula here is access, comprehension, and influence. Make sure LLMs can access you, understand you, and then you understand what are the incremental use cases for your business and your audience, and make sure your website speaks to that in the tone that is beneficial to your customer, that is true, that is authentic. What happens when you do those things, right? The reason why I wanted to share a couple of case studies is because there is always that question about, so what? Like, is this a long game? When do we even start seeing numbers move? Does it even work? I don't know, because you only know when you start working, and you have to follow the early results you get. For every business, it's different. So for example, if you're in a very crowded space and you unfortunately, at this point, do not have a very differentiated positioning, it's going to be harder for you today, but it doesn't mean, right, tomorrow, right? So depending on how you're going to cater to that challenge, things may change. But let me talk about two businesses. And Brendan, Magna Education is the use case for your number two question about what do you do when you don't have SEO, AEO, you're an early stage startup, what do you do? So Scenthound was one of our earliest customers. It's a dog wellness franchise, super cute. They have monthly subscription for dog wellness, grooming, basic grooming, and health checks. And they have more than 160 locations now across the US. Just a simple formula of access, comprehension, and influence really, really supercharge their AI traffic. So what is AI traffic? Where people are clicking from LLMs and landing on your site. LLMs are not quite navigational, so this is definitely a harder feat. So this is a very, very good traffic growth story. And what is very, very interesting about this traffic is because they have interacted with LLMs, they are somewhat informed than a visit from traditional Google search. So the conversion we see through that channel is very, very high. Nothing that I've ever seen in my marketing career so far. Magna Education, on the other hand, when they engaged with us, they had a website, but really no SEO or AEO foundation. In that case, the hypothesis we took was, what if you were to optimize for AI search first? Because by doing so, there are some technical SEO elements that you end up deploying. What you don't do in this case is really the blocks that featured into keywords and rankings. I'll tell you why that approach worked. One is, of course, the numbers, but I'll talk about the theory also. So their total traffic. So here, because they didn't have a baseline, we looked at the total traffic, not just the traffic coming from LLMs, and that grew about 13 times. Now, The reason why I think that worked in retrospect is because even if you today start ranking number 1 or number 2 for a keyword, you are way at the bottom on the Google search page. Your visibility is really challenged. So you really want to think about how you get featured in the AI overview answer rather than ranking. There is some correlation, but people clicking on that keyword ranking and then coming to your website, the probability is going down with every day. Also, as a startup, it is very difficult, depending on your space though, but it's generally very difficult to claim that number 1 or number 2 spot in Google search because it requires significant investment to get there. So, Brandon, answering your number 2 question first, if you are an early stage startup, you don't have a lot of web presence, do AEO, make sure your technical SEO foundation is there, make sure that you're allowing LLMs, so access, comprehension, influence, make sure you follow it. That's not going to be enough though for you to start driving traffic. If you're very, very early stage, you will have to do other things to get the word out, to create brand awareness. For example, a few things I'm doing is doing events like this, or being active on LinkedIn, and paid campaigns can also work. But this is a foundation that you need to have, if not today, tomorrow. So just invest in it from scratch, and it's not that difficult. Number 1, about optimize for SEO and AEO concurrently. I am of the belief that, again, start with AI search for the reasons that I mentioned. Right now, for across the businesses I work with, it's the same team that does SEO and AEO, both. And I talk about making sure that first, technically, your website is strong. Don't compromise on that. And then maybe do one less article, but make sure your website is technically strong. That is way more important. Brendan, did that answer your question? Yeah, you can do thumbs up.
Yes, very much. Thank you, Ruchi.
Of course. Another thing, which is, I hope it doesn't sound scary. That's not the intent. This is actually an excellent opportunity for you to start working on these foundational things on your website because as we know, LLMs are going to offer more and more use cases across search, commerce, discovery, decisions. So there are ads that are now popping up in OpenAI, ChatGPT. There is going to be commerce within the flow. So just knowing the baseline of what LLMs resonate with you, what they do with your content can tell you where to focus. For example, with your server log data, you can see what LLMs are actually coming to your site or bringing people to your site. That's very, very important to know. So start today, so you will have some time to learn and warm up to this big change that is coming up in search and discovery tomorrow. Ultimately, the LLMs will learn about you from somewhere. My urge is that make sure it's really from you. This is my QR code for LinkedIn. Connect with me. I learn equally as much when somebody reaches out to me. So ask me questions. If there is anything I can do to help, I'm here. And if you want to learn more about Kachi.ai, and by the way, if you're wondering what that is, it's a Japanese word for win or victory. It also means raw in my mother tongue, Gujarati, in India. And the reason why I chose that word is AI search is such a new space that only way to win is by being raw and curious. Nobody has all the answers, but I'm glad you all are here and starting your journey, and I'm glad I could be a part of it. So with that, Kim, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ruchi. And here at Sidebar, we are very much, like I said, growth oriented. So we would appreciate your feedback. If you could take a snap of the QR code, or here's the survey I'm going to include in the link. Please give us your feedback. Let us know what topics, what this topic specifically meant to you, how you might, what you took away from it, how you might improve it. Let us know if there's any additional topics that we could also include in any future presentations. And for any of you, we've got about 8 minutes. We have an opportunity, like I said in the beginning, to personally engage with Ruchi, learn from her expertise, ask her targeted questions. Ruchi, I'm just going to open it up for anybody who has a question to use this as an opportunity to engage with you directly as we take some time to answer the feedback or provide some feedback on the survey. To get us,
I always wonder whether it's a good thing or a bad thing when there are no questions.
well, sometimes it takes a second to ask a question, and it looks like here, Tiffany, did you want to just share your comments and feedback already?
I have a question, actually.
Thanks, Chris.
It just has to do with, I've seen widely varying answers to this, but the amount of SEO traffic to a typical B2B website versus AI generated traffic. And I understand the future,
Yeah.
but looking at today, and that's why what I've heard is you don't want to just walk away from SEO. It's important, you want to do the basics of it, but you also obviously need to jump into the AEO and look towards the future. I'm curious your thoughts on that. And again, I hear wide range of answers. Forget SEO, it's dead, doesn't do anything, to the opposite.
Yeah, Chris, you're so right. So let me tell you the data first, and then I'll tell you my opinion. If you just look at the data of who is bringing you traffic, LLMs today, for most of the businesses, are maybe bringing 1% of the traffic. It is disappointing, right? Because we think that people are searching on LLMs, but from a traffic perspective, it's so small. But I always like to ask why that's the case. And it's because LLMs are not quite navigational. If you're using free version of ChatGPT or Claude, you don't see links most of the time. So what are you going to click? So there are many research studies that point to the fact that about 70% of the traffic now that comes organically or directly to your website is influenced by LLMs. Of course, that percentage varies depending on what space you are in. Can you prove that? It is technically impossible, because when I ask an LLM a question, it's LLM fetching the data versus me coming to the website. There is an entity change. So how can, as a business, connect those entities together? So there is some trust involved in the process. We have tried to experiment a little bit with it. So for example, what if you were to supercharge 4 or 5 different levers for AEO? Does the goodness show up in your direct traffic? We haven't had astounding success to say we have figured it out, meaning while AI search performs better in that case, and we can see LLM traffic going up to the website, we don't see that translating with equal intensity directly on the homepage. And it's because we also work with kind of sizable businesses, so it's very hard to move that metric. Given that, how do you balance what you do, or is SEO dead? So look, I do think that the essence of why SEO existed, which is you want to talk about the topics related to your business and the keywords related to business, stay true, because that's informative. You want to talk about that. But what that emerged as is like write blogs where keyword traffic is high. I think that extreme shouldn't exist anymore, because people are going to be asking more targeted and direct questions, and they are not just going to search for, forgive my language, but like random keywords. Okay, that was not such a bad language, but like random keywords, they're going to be targeted with their question. So in that case, really, like, forget about what happened so far. Take a pause. Think about, why do you exist? What is the story you want to tell? What are more information pieces that you can put on your website? And then if you were to roll that out, you will not only improve AI search, you will improve your Google AI overviews, you will improve your SEO, but not in the sense of catering to keywords, but really the topics. And that's the shift that I help the businesses with.
Great, thank you.
Of course. Actually tracked well. Yeah, so Cynthia, as I said, what you can track directly and attributable to LLMs are humans directly coming from LLMs to your website. That is easy to track. What is difficult to track is that if somebody learned about you in LLMs and then they directly came to your website by searching about you on Google, that's where the tracking breaks right now.
Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
But we wouldn't know if LLMs were actually using some kind of search API in the background to manifest whatever like results there are. In essence, like there's some hidden usage from LLMs that might not get tracked. Is that also considered?
Well, so if I understood your question correctly, you can track today what LLMs come to your website with what intent. So for example, in our dashboard, we can show that these LLMs came to these pages to train for the future models of LLMs. These LLMs came to your website, these pages, this type from this country to index your pages, to real-time retrieve the information. We can have all that goodness shown to you, which acts almost like as a leading indicator to traffic, which was then leading indicator to revenue. I hope that answered the question. Otherwise, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be very happy to take that conversation forward. And Kumar, we have 1 minute. Yeah, please go ahead, ask the question.
So I have a quick question, because what I did was I asked a question in ChatGPT, asking, do ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and other LLMs access the index website using the similar crawlers and robots.txt rules? And the answer was OpenAI is different, Google is different, Anthropic is different. So how do you, is there a general thing you can do, or you have to customize it based on the LLM?
Yeah, so starting with general things is sufficient. So robots.txt are the rules that you can set for all LLMs. And it's very simple. Are you allowed or not? That's all. That's all. Now, if the party is fun or not, that's a separate question. So generally, you can say all LLMs or some LLMs are allowed on my website versus not. Sophistication around how LLMs operate, each LLM operates differently. What you do is kind of like an advanced stage course. So, but I'll give you an example, Gemini. Gemini really puts emphasis on YouTube, and YouTube doesn't just mean uploading your video, but really spelling out what this video is about, why that matters, linking that to your website. Not so much loved and appreciated by other LLMs as much. So there are nuances like that. But just knowing first, allowing, and then looking at your server logs to see what LLMs are truly resonating and what is the delta you want to fix, that is kind of the second stage, which we didn't talk about today for obvious reasons. But I'm happy to answer that one-on-one. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think we're at time.
Yes, thank you so much, Ruchi. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, giving us very tactical, practical, specific, and relevant advice. Love that. And thank you, everybody, for being engaged, for joining us today, and for everybody who did ask their questions and got some personal advice. Thank you so much for raising your hand and coming on with us. And again, for anybody who's interested, there will be a replay of this session on Sidebar's YouTube channel in about 48, let's say 2 to 3 business days. At the same time, I'm going to be sending out a email follow-up, including the link to this specific replay from Sidebar's YouTube channel as well. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. And Ruchi, thank you so much again for sharing your expertise.
And thank you, Kim, for having me. Thank you, everyone.